from Shardeum. He's in charge of the ecosystem and fundraising. We have Lawrence, also a co-founder from BTS Labs. And then last but not least, we have David from Taiko. Okay, so how about we just start, and then maybe you guys can also give a little bit intro about your organizations and your role in it. Just a better version than what I just said.
You wanna go first? I'll go last. Then.
Oh, sure. So I'm Dima, co-founder of Layer N. Layer N is a novel layer 2, which is just about to come out of stealth, aimed to reinvent how we think about rollups in general and solve a lot of friction around DeFi or just in general finance built on blockchains.
Hi, my name's Yan, and from the Spartan group. So we are an investment fund as well as an investment advisor. We also have a labs arm that we incubate early stage projects. We've been in the industry since 2017 and have gone through quite a few cycles. And we are a huge supporter for all the different ecosystems. We are basically investors in all the layer ones that you know of, and then we are continuing to support all different on the startups on all different stages. Yeah.
Hey everyone, my name is Greg. I'm the head of ecosystem and fundraising at Shardeum. We're an EVM-based layer 1 backed by Ember Group, Spartan, Jane Street, and many others. It's the first blockchain in the world where the more validators there are in the network, the more transactions it can process per second. And our co-founder Nishal built the largest centralized exchange in India. So we have a very fast-growing community in India.
Hi guys, this is Lawrence from BTS Labs. Since Eric has done the presentation early, so I will try to be brief. I'm in charge of our ventures. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is David and I lead ecosystem finance at Taiko. Taiko is a ZK-Rollup on Ethereum. We are building a type 1 zkEVM, which means we're maximally Ethereum aligned and equivalent. What that really means in practice is that for developers it's the smoothest onboarding experience you can have. It's exactly as is on Ethereum, and we also maximize security by having a fully decentralized and permissionless proposer and prover set. So that's essentially our pitch, and yeah, happy to chat more about it.
So I head up the flow trading function, which is pretty much all client liquidity requirements, be it structured products at the private wealth level, institutional grade, hedging requirements, and even retail, simple retail stuff that we put on our Whalefin platform. So I kind of have some ideas about it, and then we cross it together with our quant and tech teams as well. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Let's start off by sharing a little bit of what you guys see in terms of pain points you see in the industry in terms of scaling, because today we have projects that really focus on the financial aspect of scalability, and then we also have Delroy, which is from Ember, also on the other side of the liquidity spectrum. So how about we start with one of you to see what do you think one of the pain points for scalability is in the industry.
Do you want me to start?
Sure.
Sure. I think scalability is, at least in my mind, one of the top 3 challenges of crypto as a whole. I think we've kind of established, or at least shown what is possible in a permissionless network and the advantages it can bring, not just in finance but beyond. But finance, I think, is a very apt initial particular use case, and that's why it's grown, because of course it's the transfer of value, and that kind of really is a very powerful tool. But we very quickly also realized that where the limits are in terms of scalability, and that not security is paramount. So yes, you can create blockchains, but participants will not be willing to maybe put a lot of assets on those if they don't feel that they are secure. So that kind of brings us to essentially where Ethereum, I think, is and how it's established itself, and what we as a layer 2, as a whole, are really trying to do in inheriting that security, so giving that confidence to participants to put liquidity and assets on chain, but at a much faster speed and at a lower cost, because a lot of business models will only really become feasible once we solve that challenge. And I think we are very close to doing that. It is certainly, I mean, if you go back 2 years, there's so many people saying that this is going to be years away, and I think with actually ZK development has shown that it's moved at exponential speed, and that we're not very far at all. And I think all teams are really doing great things, but just taking different approaches. And yeah, I think once we do solve this challenge and meaningfully see user adoption, I think it's not going to be very long before we see institutional capital moving onto the L2 space. And what that then brings, I think there is so many sectors that can, particularly in fact RWA, DeFi, can really lead the way, and I'm excited to see how that develops.
Great. Greg, you're not from an L2, you're from an L1. Do you want to share your perspective on this?
Sure. I believe one of the biggest challenges with scalability today is the fact that most of these networks have a fixed TPS capacity. Today we don't really have to worry about reaching these bottlenecks because unfortunately we haven't found a lot of use cases yet that generate mainstream user demand. But if you look at Web 2 applications like WhatsApp that are doing 1.1 million messages per second, one day we are going to find use cases in Web 3 that go mainstream, and we need infrastructure that can scale to support that. With many of the blockchains today, they have a fixed TPS capacity, maybe it's 300 TPS, 1000 TPS, and once they reach that limit, they'll run into the same problem Ethereum has, which is congestion. So how do you continue to scale and keep fees low and enable your network effect and ecosystem to continue to scale? To do that, you need parallelization, we believe, at Shardeum. There's been numerous attempts at horizontal scaling and processing transactions in parallel, but there's been no perfect implementation of it yet. Most networks that have attempted sharding have made various trade-offs or had developer challenges that have prevented them from generating a lot of adoption and continuing to grow. At Shardeum, we've built a network where each time a new validator becomes active, you get an increase in TPS while retaining the same composability experience you have on other layer ones like Ethereum. So we're really excited about this concept of aligning scalability and decentralization. But the more decentralized the network becomes, the more scalable it becomes, so you can keep fees low. And then enable new use cases like microtransaction use cases where you can have transactions valued at 1 cent or less. Maybe things like a rewards program on chain for Starbucks. Things like that can exist on expensive blockchains today, but Shardeum will make them possible.
You wanna share?
Yeah, I guess I can give another take, like from L2 perspective, right? How we think about blockchains in our team, like we look at primary use case of blockchains, it's financial applications, and you don't even need a mainstream application to realize that, okay, we need hundreds of thousands of transactions a second. It's not enough to just operate with like a few hundred or even a few thousands, right? Binance operates with 700,000 transactions a second, Nasdaq 200,000. Same applies for pretty much every exchange. And without those numbers, it's hard to imagine world to transition from centralized exchanges to decentralized, because simply market makers cannot provide the best liquidity without those parameters. And that's problem number one, just pure throughput, so that we can't operate within like this bounds of a few hundred transactions a second. And the second one is really performance, right? Performance when it affects like latency of users, like when your order takes like a few hundred milliseconds to process instead of a millisecond, it strongly affects like how you provide liquidity, how users interact with your chain, etc. And so in layer N perspective, like we want to resolve those bottlenecks, remove those issues to really enable like real financial use cases beyond like AMMs, beyond simple primitives, and so that you can confidently say that I can deploy an exchange which can rival centralized exchanges in terms of performance, liquidity, and especially permissionlessness and security.
Great, thanks for their great perspective from the project side. And I just want to give the stage to Delroy. Maybe you can say something from the institutional trading side and see, anything that's scalability or liquidity related in the current market condition.
I think all our friends over here just mentioned, probably like good use cases where, DeFi, crypto technology, blockchain technology can be applied to the pain points in, trading from a traditional finance standpoint. So, as the bull market kind of erupted out of, DeFi summer in 2020 and then gradually 2021, everybody got extremely hyped up and, cared very little about counterparty risk, right? And so we soon saw how that kind of blew up in 2020, right? Several counterparties, starting from Three Arrows, and then, eventually the collapse of Luna that, and Grayscale, caused several counterparties to drop, or lose money or became illiquid, and eventually the last one being FTX, right? So in terms of scalability, right, like if we do not kind of use this new form of technology and innovation, right, to apply into our cowboy Wild West world, then really, we're doomed to fail in that sense, right, after the moment the bubble bursts. So from an institutional trading, or at least from a centralized trading perspective, right, pain points exist in terms of counterparty, which really it's a human problem, right? So, as what my friends over here have shared, right, like the application of zero knowledge use cases, the ability to scale, to cross-pollinate all these chains quickly, cheaply, effectively, is not only a solution to what we see in the real world in terms of fintech, right, but also towards trading that we kind of saw this brief lift off over 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, that is a very good, supplementary view from a more centralized trading institutional perspective. And I just want to give the stage to our venture partners here from Spartan and also BTS Labs. So these being the problems that we face nowadays, do you see any innovative solutions that have come out over the past year? I know it's been a crypto winter, but maybe you can share some of the insights as well.
Sure, I can speak. I think just one point on the liquidity thing as well. I think liquidity is like a relative term. Like our industry as a whole wants to draw more liquidity into the entire ecosystem, like the larger than life crypto ecosystem. So, and that is where, that's the foundation. And then if you take a multi-year, a really long horizon on what liquidity means that we're building up the foundation for what's going to be built on top of that. Because, we have fintech, we have our currencies and all these financial applications without blockchain, right? We use money, we trade, and we buy and sell. And that's the foundation of the economy, right? Like everything starts with that. So you have something to prove that you own something, and you buy and sell. But in the context of blockchain or Web3, it's more like I particularly think that financial applications are going to be the infrastructure layer of everything, and particularly NFTs is like a form of proof of ownership. That's like you finally have digital assets that you can buy and trade. And at the same time, you also have different coins, different currencies that you can have different utilities and different financial qualities associated with them. Then that's the two really fundamental elements of building like a digital economy, so to speak. So I think in the long term, we do think that once the financial layer has been sort of completed, there are going to be much more use cases and much more innovation happening on top. It's just we're so nascent still, like that a lot of the applications right now stay on the infrastructure or on the financial layer. So we do believe that the final sort of thing that would drive the entire industry forward is user adoption, like both on the user side, retail side, and also institutional side. And for that to happen, it might take multiple cycles. It might take many projects like FTX to fail, right? To build that trust over time, and also for the infrastructure to mature. Because without good infrastructure, you can't really build good use cases. But it's a chicken egg problem. Like without good products, you also don't have the incentive to build more infrastructure. So I think it does take a lot of conviction, like across industry, both from the capital side and also on the project side, to sort of be committed to the long-term horizon. And oftentimes, in our industry is like very short term, like thinking. We started off with a lot of speculations, and then that might be the first draw for people to get to know crypto. Rather, you have like opportunity to do 100x rather than like traditional finance or something, and then you can flip an NFT for a couple hundred times also, which is like very crazy to think of. But I would say that's the first cycle when we actually draw a lot of users. So I think from now on, we do think like as all these infrastructures start to mature, we have, like layer twos are going to be making the blockchains more efficient, and transaction speed and all these scalability issues are being addressed. I'm more excited to see more use cases to be built on top. And in terms of innovations, I would say all the layer twos are great. They're all addressing the problem from different angles, and it will likely be sort of like a multiverse where you have different ecosystems, and then they're not necessarily competitive to each other, but they have their own sort of characteristics. And but in terms of user adoption, what I think is critical is still, how do you make users feel like they're not even using a blockchain? I think for that, I've been following like account abstraction on Ethereum, and also the NFT bond account. Sorry, NFT token. Sorry, NFT bond account. Yeah, C541. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I think that's very interesting to me, particularly because of it really offers an opportunity for mass adoption, because you are essentially deleting the friction for users to start to use your product. Well, that will benefit all the projects building on Ethereum, and we're seeing a lot of account abstraction wallets coming up, and we also see Safe, which used to be Gnosis Safe. They actually spun off from Gnosis, and they're actually building out an entire new middle layer for account abstraction infrastructure, and they're inviting a lot of new developers to be built on top. So yeah, I think that's actually something that I really look forward to see what's going to happen in the next year or two. Yeah. Sorry, that's a bit long.
No, that was great.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's all about a massive adoption, right? Yeah, if no one is using it, then the technology is nothing, to the world. So yeah, I've just been to the Turkey and Korea, and I do see, ERC 4337 and the ERC 6551. They are really causing the fuss, in different markets. 4337 is actually lowering the entry barrier, for ordinary users. They don't actually need to recite their secret keys or anything, because in a traditional way, if you lose them, then your crypto assets is gone forever. But with the help of 4337, so you don't have to remind all of these things. You can actually bundle your wallet with your social accounts, or anything similar. And for 6551, you can actually bundle your account with all these NFTs. It's actually like a watermark, on each NFT that you own. And you can actually have your NFTs technically on each chain. So you don't have to create a new NFT on each chain. Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Yeah, these are actually very exciting developments in the space. But let's just fall back to the financial layer for a second, because as Yan was mentioning, like this is probably the foundational layer of blockchain and cryptocurrency in general. And we do see the trend definitely going forward would be institutional, with like all the ETFs pending for approval, and also it's gonna be, way more emphasis on security. So I was just wondering if you guys could share some light on, how you deal with like the potential security issues. This morning I saw that CoinEx was hacked, and then it just like it has been a constant theme in our newspaper. Just wondering, how do you guys think and deal with that? We can start with David. Yeah.
Sure, happy to. As you pointed out, hacks are commonplace. It seems like you don't feel like one day goes by where you don't see one. The reality is, I think we'll continue to see that still for a while. I think that's just part of the price that is to pay as we're at the frontier of finance, and these are immutable smart contracts, or most of the time they are at least. And there are a lot of smart people out there, and they will find exploits. But the hope I take, as awful as it is for the victims, is that with every hack, with every exploit, we learn more. And I think this is just kind of like, I think someone else put it well and said that we're speed running kind of OPSEC in crypto, and we really are. But it's just like, if there's any silver lining to it, is that hopefully we'll get to a point where it doesn't stop completely, but at least we will have covered, I'd say, the majority of bases. And if you look from where we have been, we've come a long way, but still there is more to be learned. In terms of DeFi itself, I think so. We will see more hacks, but I think we'll also start seeing more liquidity come in. Already, if you look at DEX volume compared to centralized exchanges, they're basically on par. And I think CZ himself has openly said that he believes in the next few years that will overtake it. So I think that one's it's a pretty common view, and if you take that forward, then really, there's a question to be had, like, what is the centralized exchange business model at that point? Do you start your own chain? Do you kind of like do that? That's one angle, I suppose, but that's a whole different conversation. But what does it mean for the end user? It kind of comes back to what these guys were saying, right? You have to abstract the complexity in order to allow, because what is the attraction of centralized exchanges? It is the user interface. It is the ease. It is the cost. So if these things go hand in hand, if DeFi, more primitives start coming, I think the options market is a very interesting one. New forms of stable coins like Flatcoin and that kind of stuff. I think stable coins is still the best product market fit that crypto has as a whole. It's very boring, but it's changed the most lives in my view, and that's ultimately what kind of we're all here for, I suppose. So those are the interesting places I think that we'll start to see developments, and then concurrently improvements in user experience will hopefully make DeFi a thing that people use without even realizing they're using it. Sending money across borders, in-trade finance, whether it is more institutional side as well. But there's so many opportunities that really come from getting more liquidity as well as improving the user experience, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, I think there's a few different perspectives on security. One is obviously smart contract security, and I think we're getting better at security of smart contracts. A lot of the existing protocols we're using have been around for a long time and have proven to be pretty safe. But with the innovation, you have security risks, so definitely need to spend a lot of time, auditing new products that are being innovated, and we're learning from prior experiences to prevent future security risks on chain. And then with decentralization comes security. So if you look at what's happened in the past year in decentralized finance, we're gravitating on-chain more. I think Uniswap's trading volume has surpassed Coinbase's in recent months. And so, on-chain is definitely more secure than relying on centralized intermediaries. And I think we'll continue to see greater adoption of decentralized systems over centralized finance for retail users, at least.
Yeah, when it comes to securities, this is a problem that's not unique to Web3. It's like all over Web2. Banks get hacked like every year on massive volumes, right? Millions of dollars get lost by various hacks, including the technical ones. But what's nice about Web3 is that you are dealing with a lot more threat vectors, right? The entire process of building in Web3 assumes that you need to go through all kinds of attacks. And it kind of nurtures a community of developers who care a lot more about security, who think a lot deeper about the problems. And maybe today we are suffering a lot more hacks. Maybe today we are dealing with a lot more money lost. But in the long term, it also means that we can arrive at a point where this place is a lot more safer to store your money, to trust your users, and trust like counterparties. Because like what Delroy was saying is that the issue of counterparty is massive in traditional finance. But if you can eliminate that and go through this cycle of massive hacks and arrive at a point where you can trust everything that you touch in DeFi a lot more than in CeFi, I think it's worth it, and I think we're like in the right direction right now.
Great. Thank you for sharing all your insights, and I want to open it up to the floor and see if anyone has any questions for our panelists here. Oh.
Hi guys, thank you for sharing. I think one theme that's cutting across token 2049 this time around is a lot of side events talking about ZK, and you know, different polygons got the ZK, Taiko's got the ZK, and whatever, right? So what does ZK mean to you? What is the utility for ZK for you?
You want to answer it?
Yeah.
I mean, unless someone else wants to. No? That's a great question, and yeah, you're right. ZK is everywhere. It's one of the hottest topics, and we're right in the midst of it as well. We're using ZK for scalability because essentially it's proving that something happened without having to put the whole computation on chain. That's one angle. It's the one that excites people the most because scalability, of course, is such a big issue. But it really doesn't stop there. I think A16Z put out a really nice video recently explaining it, and they compared it to magic, right? And it really is. The math behind it is way above my head, at least, but it's fundamentally really is like magic. And the doors it opens go so far beyond, I think, Web3. It's just that we find it as the most suitable and pertinent kind of solution right now to many problems we have, because scalability is one, privacy is another. I think I would probably say, and it is already, but privacy is another area where ZK can be particularly useful. But even for more simple things like verifiable randomness, oracles, there's many applications that can be used. It's just a question of how impactful will it be, and is it the right tool for the job? Frankly speaking, I think because it's such a hot topic, a lot of people will use it as a tool when maybe it's not even, like, it kind of comes back to like, do you really need a blockchain for it, right, that you get off? And I think it's going to be the next cycle is like, do you really need ZK for this, or are you just using it as a buzzword? I don't think we've got there yet, but I wouldn't be surprised, or maybe we have, I guess it's arguable, but I think we'll probably see a lot more of it. It's just a question of like, okay, is the complexity, because it's not simple, is the complexity of the solution really solving a pain point that is big enough, I think. I would argue for scalability and privacy for sure. Other areas, TBD. I'm more of a proponent of use the tool that makes the most sense, and don't over-engineer it, but yeah, that's just my view. Anyone?
Sure. ZK is being talked about so much because it's a new innovation that enables some really cool utility. We haven't found a lot of use cases in applications yet. As the Taiko team member here mentioned, it's primarily being used to enable transactions to be executed off-chain by powerful nodes, so we can increase the speed of the transactions we can process per second at layer 2, but still retain security at layer 1. But the idea of being able to, verify something happened or something exists without actually seeing that data is really powerful. And so there's teams out there building things like the ability to verify your bank account balance without having to actually give access to that bank account or share the, data from your account. So it's definitely more convenient for privacy, and over time we'll continue to see more implementations of this. But anytime there's new innovations that enable a better experience than what already exists, it's going to be a hot topic. I think I really hope we see more application use cases of it. I think layer 2s are very powerful technology, but ZK itself does not increase the speed of execution. What increases the speed of execution is the ability to use more powerful computers off-chain to execute those transactions faster, and ZK enables you to verify those proofs. I think we need to see more innovation in things like sharding and parallelization to improve scalability on-chain. So I'm really excited about application use cases of ZK.
Great, thanks. That's a great. Those are great answers. Yeah, honestly, too many ZK days, right? Oh, sure. Yeah, we have another question.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Rushal. So I have this belief where I say is that a blockchain is as secure as its oracles and bridges. I do believe into that because if we have seen a lot of hacks have not been on chain, they have been to the connector points of Web 2 to Web 3. So as all the layer ones here, layer ones and layer twos, how do you perceive an oracle or a bridge? Like when you're building all of this, you have done great job on for the on-chain security. But what about this connection points? How do you perceive that? How do you think of choosing oracles or bridges, or like recommending to your users that these are the things that you use? What about the security on that points? I really wanted to understand how it works from yes. And
I mean, in the end, from layer 2 perspective, the goal is to provide all the tools necessary for blockchain developers to make those decisions themselves, right? I don't think it's wise to build in some oracle or bridge dependency into the infrastructure itself. You want to be as secure as possible, but in the end of the day, making all the toolings available, all the oracles, bridges available to other users to make those decisions for themselves. And to mitigate all kinds of potential risks if you over-rely on a bridge, for example, as we've seen in a past year, or this year even, how dramatic can be those hits from those hacks.
Yeah, I think a few questions ago we were talking about security, and security is so complex because the blockchain itself can be decentralized and secure, but if infrastructure in your ecosystem becomes really popular and it's centralized, and there's a black swan event with that specific piece of infrastructure, then it can have a very negative impact on the ecosystem as a whole. So when looking at oracles, I think it's important to think about the security of the oracle, the level of decentralization of the oracle, and try to make a conscious effort to promote products that you believe are secure and decentralized. At the end of the day, it's an open marketplace, and there's going to be competition between different providers, and it really depends on what developers choose to use, but I think developers will continue to gravitate towards the most efficient and secure solutions. And so, for Oracle specifically, I think it's important to think about, can anyone run host the Oracle? Is it permissionless, or is it, hosted by one specific Oracle provider? How many different node operators are there running these oracles? Those are some things we think about at Shardeum.
Yeah, I think Dima and Greg really covered the main points here, so not too much to add. I very much agree with Dima's point about not being prescriptive. I think when you're building an infrastructure layer, particularly if you're permissionless and agnostic, so enabling different oracles is great. Don't want to hard code anything and prescribe, that's for sure. But what you're describing is the oracle problem. I mean, I feel like it's an oxymoron. It's always going to be there. You're going to get data from off-chain, from a different area into an off-chain. Yes, you can diversify it and decentralize it, but if the source of that data is somehow manipulated, then you will be affected. But I would turn that around and say that's a problem even can be a problem anywhere. Manipulation of prices happens even in TradFi. So that's not to say that it shouldn't be addressed. But I think you can minimize it and mitigate it. As infrastructure providers, we just want to make sure that developers have the choice, and ultimately, I think as Oracle providers, you can do your bit. But in my mind, it's a problem. I don't know. I don't think that it's. I feel like it's always ultimately there because of the nature of what they solve. But yeah, maybe I hope I'm wrong.
Okay, maybe you have time for one last question on this gentleman right here.
This one would be for Dima, Greg, and David. Basically, I'm seeing a lot of L1s and L2s. Just like we're having so many ZK days, there's so many chains all the time, and that was a trend. Like everyone who's new to building, or anybody any experienced entrepreneur, even in the crypto space, has been venturing into L1s and L2s. But the truth of the market is on-chain activity has fallen down. Not so sure about builder activity. I think strong builders are still building. But my question is, what are you guys specifically doing to attract on-chain activity and builders and kind of build a blossoming ecosystem? Because that's the most important KPI for you, I guess. So what are you doing? I'm just curious.
I mean, we are thinking about it like how can we unlock more opportunities for developers to build more things, right? For past few years, innovation has been very minimal, very marginal compared to what it used to be. Even when we look at, let's say, DeFi 1.0, what came out, and how different all of the new DeFi protocols are today from it, right? Main restriction so far has been like how much can you code new in Solidity, right? How many new things can you reinvent? How much can you modify original AMM algorithm, right? For us, it's about unlocking new opportunities and going from, let's say, what we are doing max today, 100 transactions on the VM, to doing hundreds of thousands of them, right? When you scale compute by 3 magnitudes, you see a huge difference in terms of what can be done, right? You no longer think about, let's say, lending protocols with simple linear function. You start to think about it, okay, now I can do a lot more with it. I can put a model on chain to analyze all the risk. Like I can take data from volatility, all the exchanges, because I have enough of things to do. And that also drives more usage because for now, like we have very limited tools available for people to build new things. But if you build completely new thing, which was better products than it used to be, right? And I'm not talking better by 10%, by better by a few X. Like then it like makes a difference, and it can drive a lot more usage, a lot new usage, and not repetition of like the same thing over and over again. So overall, like for us, it's all about unlocking more opportunities and more products to build. So we no longer in this state where we are trying to improve what exists today by a few percent, but really reinvent DeFi itself, let's say.
The reason there's not a lot of on-chain activity today is because we haven't found problems that a mainstream amount of users face that can be best solved with decentralization yet. So this isn't something that Shardeum itself is doing, but something we're promoting to founders is, to go back to the Web2 way of validating business ideas and, survey, users and find common problems that, a lot of people face and build a decentralized solution that's better than what centralization can do to solve that problem. Shardeum specifically is helping developers acquire users. From a marketing perspective, I look at different blockchains like different websites where each blockchain has its own unique community with different demographics. And you can help developers access those communities and grow the usage of their product. So at Shardeum, we have something called Proof of Community, where our community ambassadors host different events in cities around India, Nigeria, Philippines, Vietnam, Ghana, Africa, Kenya, and we're trying to grow the space and bring more users and developers in. Web3 as a whole is still very small relative to the total population of internet users, and so rather than focusing on the existing users and developers that are already here, we're hosting events where we teach developers how to deploy their first smart contract, teaching users how to install their first self-custodial wallet. Right now we're actually doing a 65-day tour at 50 universities in India where students are learning for the first time how to deploy their first smart contract. OKX is sponsoring that event because they're trying to grow in India and they're working with Shardeum to access the user-developer community there. So we're really focused on education and bringing more people into the space rather than trying to compete for the users and developers that are already here.
I think that's a great question, actually, and it's twofold in my mind. It's one, the point that was made about how do we bring more users into Web3 as a whole, and I think that kind of comes back to the point about building applications with meaningful use cases, abstracting the complexity, and I think that's a burden that probably falls more on the shoulders of the app developers. We as infrastructure providers build the foundation for them to do that, and by solving issues such as scalability, privacy, it hopefully spurs on a kind of another renaissance of kind of like apps that we haven't thought about yet. So that's kind of one side. To the second part of the question about how do we at Taiko think about onboarding users, our thesis is don't fight the trend. give users, in this case developers, what they want. And to us, we think that right now there's an overabundance of L2 supply over demand. And the developer attention that we have is a very scarce commodity that, frankly, we're all kind of fighting over to get. And in my view, that no amount of, ecosystem incentives, branding, marketing really will solve that. It's about, actually solving the friction problem and making it as easy to deploy as possible. That's the reason why we're building a Type 1 zkEVM. We're Ethereum equivalent, which means from a developer perspective, there's zero opportunity cost to deploy on us. It's literally just a gas fee. You don't have to recompile, no re-auditing. You don't have to hire anyone to watch over the code base. It's just as Ethereum. And the reason the basis behind our thesis is optimistic rollups. We look at optimistic rollups and say there have been a tremendous success. There's billions of dollars of value there. And they're working well. I mean, even despite some of the perceived drawbacks, challenge periods, centralization, all that stuff. But that's exactly why, because they are EVM compatible and they've been able to essentially amass the user base. And what we say is Type 1 zkEVMs are essentially optimistic rollups with greater security guarantees and faster finality. So it's essentially just an iteration. And I think the fact that optimistic rollup teams are now looking at ZK themselves kind of bears that thesis out, is that they're seeing that ZK improves upon it. And so really for us, it's about, when we speak to developers, we oftentimes find this perception that, oh, okay, you're not a zkEVM, like what's the catch? And we're like, really, there is no catch. It's go check our docs, no opcode has been changed, no state trees have been changed, nothing. It's exactly as is. And then they'll go check it out and come back and like, yeah, you're right, it was exactly as it is in Ethereum. And we found that is the greatest kind of a tailwind that you can really have. And of course, you added to it extra security, so which we found for a lot of projects that haven't yet deployed on L2s because of some security concerns about centralized. That's not to say that the teams would do anything untoward, to be clear, but nonetheless, if your sequencer is centralized, that can be a security risk, or if you don't have fraud proofs, for example, things like that. And teams for whom that is a priority, we've seen that it resonates particularly well with them, and we hope, of course, to onboard them, but even beyond.
All right, perfect. Thank you all. Let's give a huge round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all for coming into our Ember office, and I hope you guys enjoy the drinks and food, and then we can start networking until 6 o'clock. Thank you, guys.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.